Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 230 of the podcast. So welcome to Rochester Rising. Whether you are a first-time listener or frequently tune in, thanks for spending some of your time with us today. Rochester Rising is a storytelling platform that launched in 2016 to tell the stories and share the business journeys of entrepreneurs in Rochester, Minnesota. We put out a new podcast each week talking with a different entrepreneur. You can catch the podcast on our website at rochesterrising.org or on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast catcher. We also produce and release an article each week based on a small portion of each podcast. We encourage you to check out both, and you can find our articles as well on our website at rochesterrising.org, as well as on our social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So if you're not giving us a follow, please do so to keep up to date with the stories that we tell. Rochester Rising is part of Collider, which is a nonprofit that activates, empowers, and connects early-stage entrepreneurs in the city of Rochester. To help make Rochester Rising sustainable and to keep telling these stories, we started a digital tip jar. If you think this platform should continue to exist and you get value from listening to these stories, consider donating to the tip jar if you can. You can find the link to our digital tip jar in our show notes. So this week, I was really excited to finally get to record in a podcast studio. So we have reconfigured our podcast studio, set it up again, the first time since last March, from March 2020. So I'm super excited to have my microphone set up again, to have nice comfy chairs to sit in. So this was the first podcast recorded in our newly set up podcast studio in Collider at MBC, and I'm very excited to get all the equipment back and to have really good audio content to share with you again. So this week, we're also doing something a little bit different. So instead of talking with an entrepreneur, I'm joined by my teammate at Collider, Jamie, to talk about an upcoming 8-week program for entrepreneurs called Basics of Entrepreneurship. This program is really geared toward entrepreneurs, people who have a business idea, or people who have already started a business but want to better understand their customers. So it's really helpful to validate an idea that you have or build your product or service in a real customer-focused manner. Participants in this course will also learn how entrepreneurs in the community apply topics that they're learning in this program within businesses that they're seeing every day in the community. And they'll also get the support and feedback from their entrepreneurial peers as they progress through the program. This Basics of Entrepreneurship course is held completely virtually on Zoom. It starts July 6th and runs through August 26th, and registration will close on June 28th for the program. So listen in, learn more how Basics of Entrepreneurship could be for you and could start you on your entrepreneurial journey. All right, so we'll launch right into the program talking about Collider's upcoming entrepreneurial education, Basics of Entrepreneurship. All right, so we are talking about Collider's upcoming Basics of Entrepreneurship program, which will last for 8 weeks. This July starts July 6th. This is the third iteration of the program. So, Jamie, I'll ask you, what is the Basics of Entrepreneurship program?
So the Basics of Entrepreneurship course is an 8-week course, which really focuses on some key parts of your entrepreneurial journey, that being the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. So we've seen people approach the class with an idea that they have for a business, all the way to a new business that probably has just gotten off the ground in the first year or so of operations and really needs some help and guidance with understanding deeply who their customer is. Basically, it's walking you through that journey with validating your idea and allowing yourself to go out and talk to potential customers, getting comfortable with that, And ultimately, hopefully you can settle on who your target market is and how you can really launch your business with focusing on the right customers at the right time.
So it sounds like this is for kind of a range of people, but kind of very early. So you have to have a business idea or something to walk through the program with, or it sounds like you already could have a business, but maybe you're looking to understand who your customers are and be able to connect with them a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the sweet spot. That's the need we've heard in the community that we felt that Collider could step up and support through this program. I love this program because it's based on a formula that works. So it's based on the book Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Aulet. It's approximately, I believe, the first third of the book, which kind of gives you that early peek into the world of entrepreneurship. And more importantly, I mean, we can talk about filing LLCs and getting a good accountant and all of that stuff. But really, when you're at that stage, you need to focus on that idea you have and understand that idea you have probably isn't the company that you will eventually create. So it may be a piece of it, but you have to deeply understand a customer need to move forward.
So it's really just looking at your idea and validating, could a business be built around this or not?
Absolutely.
What, like you said, we're not going to talk about forming LLCs and finding, service providers, but what will people learn throughout this 8-week program?
So I think you're going to learn a lot of these basics about, again, how to take an idea and test it with customers. So that involves a lot of work. So each week, you're going to take another step forward in this journey. So the first is just basically learning more about your idea, thinking about it more deeply, then trying to come up with various personas of who your customers are, and be able to kind of create these archetypes, like who is the person you're building this business for in a very general sense. Then you're going to look at your market. So you're going to start thinking about all the different various markets. We hear many times at Collider, who's your target market? And everybody says it's everyone. That's never true. So we definitely work with brainstorming the process of market segmentation and then helping people sort of narrow that down a bit. And then going on this customer-focused journey, going out and challenging you to go and talk to 10, 20, 30, 50, or 100, depending on how motivated you are, potential customers that fit that particular archetype, and then being able to gather a lot of data based on that to give yourself an idea of, have you really nailed the problem? And does your product fit that? So we always refer to that as product market fit. So I think there's definitely that journey. The cool thing is that it's just not us teaching a course where you show up and it's kind of like you have this thing you got to do and kind of back and forth. But we have a great group of entrepreneurs in our community who are going to step up to actually be present at each course and be able to share their story with you. So you're getting almost real-world case studies, which we think is a huge, very valuable part, because we can teach this. I always referred to it as textbook learning, but really in reality, what you want to hear is the real story from an entrepreneur. And so I think that's the hidden value of this, is being able to hear how entrepreneurs in our community have taken these particular concepts that we're talking about and actually put them into practice for their business.
Yeah, I think that's the important part, because like you said, you can read a textbook, think that maybe this isn't applicable to what I'm doing, but it is. And then you have these examples from people that in the Rochester community that people probably know that are saying, this is how I did end user profiles, and it was important for my business. I think a lot of the times we build businesses and never interact with the customer at all, so you have no idea if you're actually solving a problem. In your head, it might seem like you have this great solution, but at least in this program, you're forced to go out and talk to at least, 15 customers to have completed it, which is invaluable, I think, for the learning experience.
Yeah, I also think too that something that maybe lost in translation. I think we're doing a better job here at Collider is really focusing on our target market, which is early stage entrepreneurs, defined as early stage in the journey, not just high tech, not medical, but it's almost any type of new business that you can think of. So we've had people in the past who have done traditional tech startups. We've had people who have done retail startups, food startups. So we think of the restaurant business, retail. And we've also had someone who wanted to challenge themselves to write a book. I mean, there's a lot of levels to entrepreneurship. And what we want people to really understand is this process, which traditionally has been developed for a tech mindset, can really be applied to almost any business. And here at Collider, we want to support any business in our Rochester community to help them get a start and get going. And more importantly, make some sales and become profitable and generate some wealth. And then you can find me across the room in 10 years and give me a high five and say, I remember when we started at Collider. Thank you so much.
I think nonprofits have gone through this curriculum too. So, at this stage of development, it's kind of suited for pretty much anything, even if it's not a for-profit business. It's really when you get later and start thinking about funding that it ends up splitting pretty quickly for people.
And as someone who's grappling and learning the nonprofit world, it is very similar. There's some other stuff that gets layered on, but I think this process works. We're the living example of this. We're using these techniques that we've learned to actually help shape Collider the nonprofit. So I think it works out really, really well. There's just different time horizons and things that you have to think about, but definitely I'd say if you have just an idea to start something, this is a great place to begin your journey.
So beyond, what we just talked about, why do you think people who have an idea or have started a business, what value will they really get out of this program? Why do you think it's important for them to consider doing this?
So I would say there's a couple of things. One would be time, and everybody says time is money. What you're going to learn in this course is a framework to really move yourself rapidly through almost a methodology which will help you move forward. We see a lot of businesses who go out on their own and say, I've got this, I can do this. And they kind of stumble around for a while trying to find that solution or that set of customers, or in some cases just might open up a shop somewhere and expect people are going to show up to them. I think this process allows you to deeply think through a lot of different parts of your business at the early stage before you put tons of money into a lease or a restaurant or a food cart or anything like that, or a high-tech startup. That allows you to really prove the market out before you're ready to jump, headfirst into it. I think the other value for me is almost a Zen-like clarity. So you're going week after week through this process. You're checking the boxes. You're learning more about your potential company, but also about yourself as an entrepreneur. I think that's super valuable. It's almost, again, it's almost like this Zen-like clarity where you don't feel you're being pulled in 20 different directions as an entrepreneur. You're actually being guided through this by a community of people who want to support you.
I would say I think an important part too is that, you're going to have the support of peers and people kind of at the same stage of business development, which is a huge advantage because entrepreneurship is considered to be extremely risky. It's really hard to relate to it unless you are doing it yourself. We hear all the time someone walk in the door and say, I just quit my job and now I'm starting a new business, and everyone in here says, congrats. And they're like, this is the first time I heard this. Everyone else was saying, well, how are you going to make money? How are you blah, blah, blah. So, I think having people with a similar mindset is so important because it's so easy to get discouraged along this pathway.
And we've seen a lot of great examples in this course of people who get to know each other. They become cheerleaders for each other as they kind of come together as a group. So I think that's, like Amanda said, super important. And it's just interesting to see how someone that may have a company in the high-tech space can offer some very, very outside the box feedback to maybe a retail company which they would have never had a chance to hear before. So I think that's a really cool thing about each one of these groups, these cohorts, if you will, that get together to go through this experience.
So this is the third iteration of this Basics of Entrepreneurship program, but it's really kind of the fourth time we've ran some kind of program like this and learned a lot, from where it started from, where it was really intense and was, I think, for like 12 weeks or something, and 3 hours or 4 hours of education a week, which we've learned a lot. So what is new this time? What's changed? What's been added to the program?
So I think, we had been utilizing a previous program before we settled on Basics of Entrepreneurship. It was a wonderful course offered through the Kauffman Foundation. It worked really, really well. At the same time, it was taking you through the entire life cycle of a business's journey from ideation to acquisition. And we felt that was a lot to bite off in 12 weeks. It's a lot to bite off in a decade for a real business. And so we wanted to focus in on really what we felt was that area that was being underserved in our community, which was that ideation to kind of launch or a little bit beyond that of a new business. So we settled on disciplined entrepreneurship. I think the first couple of times we've run it has been very much what I would call the guest teacher model. So we're finding people, again, entrepreneurs in the community that really have mastered that particular skill set that we're talking about that week in what we're teaching. And I think that worked out well, but I think this time what we wanted to do was put a little more rigor around it. So we wanted to bring some of that rigor from the Kauffman class back so that someone going through this, if you wanted to in previous iterations of this, you probably could just kind of sit back and listen to some great stories from entrepreneurs. And that's not a horrible thing. Like, you're hearing these amazing stories of how these entrepreneurs did things. You're able to, read through a very easy to read book, helping you walk through this framework. Where I think this iteration is going to be more bringing in more of that accountability. So making sure that you do have some homework each week that you have to have and you have to present to the group. And I know that can feel super intimidating to people. So I don't want it to be, discouraging at all, because it's actually really encouraging. It's encouraging you to keep your business going, to keep hitting those milestones and taking that idea and really making a true business out of it. And that's what I'm really excited about, is kind of bringing back some of that rigor and at the same time keeping, I think, the best part, which was hearing about this stuff from actual entrepreneurs who have put this stuff into practice.
And people should expect to spend a good bit of time each week working through materials, right? So there's 2 sessions each week, which they used to be, I think, 2 or 3 hours, and now we've narrowed them down to 90 minutes twice a week, if people fill up that time, because we're always, our adage always is, if the conversation comes to a natural end before the time's up, then we're done, But people should expect to spend a significant amount of time each week doing this, which is why there's also been, that rigor added in to make sure that you're serious about testing this idea and seeing if it is viable.
Yeah, and I think, again, it sounds funny, because if I was listening to this podcast, I'd be like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. And I just want to, remind people that if you truly want to start a business, it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And it makes this class, pales in comparison versus actually putting this stuff into practice and building a business. And I think it's good. It's a way to start, I would say, walking before you run. By taking this course, you find the discipline to achieve the homework and to read the material and do all of this stuff each week. That gets you a little more disciplined, thus the name Disciplined Entrepreneurship, the book that we pulled the Basics of Entrepreneurship course from. And you start to become very disciplined and you start to move forward in the business that you're working on, which is great. And then at the end of the course, it's probably time to really drop the hammer and start really working on your business. And the cool thing is we're always there for support. So I want to definitely make that clear. This isn't you go and you hang out with us for 8 weeks and then we kick you to the curb. No, we're there to help support you through your journey. That's what Collider does in Rochester for entrepreneurs. And so we see this as the beginning, but by no means is this the end of how Collider can help you going forward.
I think, too, it's nice to have, like we were talking about, that accountability that, you could pick up this book and go through it yourself, but, now you're accountable to us, to, other people, to walk through these steps in a very manageable way. It's like we were talking about when we were doing this in the first iteration, it was significantly more work. And we've kind of pared it down and spread it out over several more weeks than we would have normally. So I think it definitely is manageable for people listening who are interested and just really want to have that extra layer of accountability to really think critically about what they want to do, for sure. Do you have any highlights of past participants and companies that have gone through that have been successful that you want to highlight?
I think I'm a bit biased because, again, I always tell people there's one rapidly evolving Collider story that I'm keeping my eye on, and that's Sherpa. Andy Vig and Chris Lukenbell went through the program when it was still the Kaufman program, which, we're not doing that particular program anymore, but a lot of that early stage stuff is still there. That's built into this course. But, at that time, Andy, I think Chris were sort of grappling with this idea as people who literally sat next to each other in a co-working space. They found a shared interest in potentially starting a company, but they didn't really know where to start. And I feel, and I think Andy's said this to me, so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, that it was really that course that helped him start to understand what he was getting into, because he had always been working for bigger companies or for established startups, but never had really jumped into something like this himself. So I think it helped him really attain that focus and that clarity to make a call on whether this was even for him or not. And many of the people who listen to this podcast know the story of Sherpa, but they're doing very, very well. They continue to grow as a business. And of course, we're cheering from them in a very, very biased way because we're homegrown here in Collider. So that's the one that sticks out for me, definitely the most.
I'd say too, we've had quite a range going through this. I think another one that went through, so we normally run one of these programs in January and one in July, hopefully to hit people, during their normal cycles. And this January, we had Chris Armstrong of Chris Armstrong Yoga go through the program, and she's doing yoga therapy kind of on a holistic level for individuals. And, she's really been running with that and bringing it forward, and something that she came into the class just in January to start thinking about her customers more clearly. So we've had quite a range from like high tech to yoga to food. So at these stages of business development, we're pretty confident that it's applicable for any early stage entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much, because of course, all businesses are focused on an idea or a passion that you have. So that's the same. Taking it through, every business has to find a customer, or at least one, to really become a true business. You have to have a paying customer. So taking you through that sort of framework is exactly the same for every business. Well, I shouldn't say exactly the same, but the fundamentals are exactly the same. So yeah, I think I love that we have this sort of diversity of industry that show up to each one of these courses. And I think that people learn a lot. Again, you learn a lot from a high-tech company. You learn a lot from a retail company, different perspectives, different insights. That's just going to make your company even better.
So I think that was about it. So where can people learn more and register, and when will registration close? Or when is the program too? Let's make sure we highlight when it's actually being run, because I'm not sure that we...
So yeah, so the class runs July 6th through August 26th. A lot of sixes there. And then you can definitely find out more information and click through to sign up at collider.mn/BOE.
And you have to register by the 28th of June, right, to get your materials in time.
Yeah, that's a pretty firm date because it does take some time to get the course materials to you. Thankfully, we have the world of Amazon, which is a little bit easier to get stuff delivered at this point. But we do want to make sure that we have everybody in place and can get you started on day one pursuing your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I will say, I think this is a great program for anyone with an idea. It's a very welcoming and friendly and constructive environment that's set up to be kind of a safe and confidential space. So really hoping that anyone listening in that is thinking of a business idea or already has a business but wants to understand customers better considers joining in. And I will say that this will be held completely on Zoom, so you do not have to be in the Rochester community. This started on Zoom during COVID, and it's continuing on Zoom just to increase accessibility. So even if you're not in Rochester, you can still connect in and participate.
Yep. That's actually been a real benefit. If there is a benefit to COVID, is we saw a lot of people from our surrounding communities, as well as some people from out of state. So hopefully we continue to see that, and I think this works super well as a virtual course. And yeah, we'd welcome anybody who wants to take that dive into entrepreneurship.
All right, I think that about covers it. So we'll have the link to register in our show notes, so we hope to see you in July. So hopefully this discussion gave you a better idea of what to expect from Basics of Entrepreneurship, and if it is a fit for you. We'd always be happy to answer any of your questions about the program, so send us a note and let us know. You can find more information and start the registration process for the program through the link in our show notes. So that's a wrap for our podcast today. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending some of your day with us. It's a huge help to us if you rate this podcast wherever you listen in so that others can find it. And also make sure that you're subscribed so that you never miss any of our stories. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode.